You're listening to Big World Network.
Average, Season 1, Episode 1, written by Jonathan Thompson, read by Heather Thompson. My father and I ate in awkward silence. Apart from the occasional creaking furniture, the only sound in the room was produced by the tinkling and scraping of our cheap forks and our cheap knives on our cheap plates. This was how things always were, how I had figured things were meant to be. But I was sick of this. I wanted to talk, to understand my father. And not just because I was going through some teenage phase. I mean, I was, but that wasn't the point. My father was a superhero. Literally. I'm not just saying that to deify the man or anything. Although several tribes in New Guinea did worship him as a rain god. But that was only because he was a full-fledged, tights-wearing, cape-having superhero. A card-carrying member of the Superheroes Union. Yes, there is such a thing, and yes, he actually did carry the card. And there was so much I didn't know, so much I wanted to understand, that he just expected me to accept and ignore. So I finally started asking questions. "Dad, what's your origin story?" I asked abruptly. I suppose it was even a little confrontational, but it didn't faze him. Well, he swallowed a mouthful of potatoes and sat back, mulling over the question. "I was born in White Plains, but grew up in—" I cut him off. "No, I mean, like, how did you get your powers?" "Oh, that. Same story, I guess. Was just born with them." "Really?" That was disappointing for many reasons. First, it was terribly boring. Second, it just emphasized the question about why I was so dreadfully normal. Yep, no radioactivity, no acid baths, not an alien, and I have no major sociopathic tendencies. He took a swig of his beer and started eating again, obviously feeling that the conversation was over. "But what about your parents? What about them? Did they have any powers?" "Oh yeah, of course," he laughed, sending flecks of food soaring through the air. I always thought his slobbering made him seem like less of a superhero and more like an average guy. I don't know where I got this idea that superheroes should be classy. I did read a lot of comic books, which, looking back on it now, was ridiculous. I lived a comic book. Why did I waste time and money on them? "Awesome. What could they do?" "Well, my dad," he said, pointing at me emphatically from across the table, "he could chug a beer faster than a speeding bullet." I slumped back in my chair, but he kept going. "And your grandmother made one mean stew." "Dad." "No, seriously. You have no idea how powerful a hearty beef stew can be against even the angriest of mobs." He smiled his wry smile and resumed eating. This sort of banter was normal between us. It was like my father never fully grew up, but then again, he didn't have to. He held within his power the ability to make just about anything he wanted a reality. Someone like that doesn't have to grow up or be serious. But I didn't have that option, and someone in the house had to act like an adult. So they were normal too, I said, thinking about how this all doomed me. "Yep, and before you ask, they were my real parents. Already told you, I'm not an alien." I gave up. My silverware resumed its course on my plate, shuffling around the overcooked steak and undercooked potatoes. I don't think the beans were cooked at all. I was surprised when my dad picked up the conversation again. "But what does it matter? I'm old news. We have to work on finding your power." "Dad, that's the point. I don't have any powers." I had reluctantly come to terms with this, but I don't think I ever truly accepted it. At the same time, I had read enough comics to know that things never go well for the people who try to give themselves superpowers. Although before I had learned that important lesson, I had once tried to build a supersuit out of Legos. Lesson learned. It's a useless hero whose weaknesses are sudden movement and skin irritation. But my dad had always had it in his head that I was going to be his successor, carry on his fight, and just generally be awesome. Coincidentally, when Dad first started heroing, he worked under the professional name Awesome, but caved under pressure from reporters who found the name difficult to use in grammatically correct ways. He finally changed to Ultrarian, which I still hated. I had tried to get him to change it countless times, but he loved it, and there's just no reasoning with a man who could crush a bus with his armpit. as was proved by his next statement. Of course you do. You're my son, the son of Ultrarian. But the parents of Ultrarian didn't have any powers. That's different. Genes don't go in that direction. What? You're coming out with me tonight, and we're going to start making a concentrated effort to figure out your power. Dad, I am not going out with you tonight. He stood up and looked at me in a way he seldom did. The way I imagined he would look at a bank robber he had cornered in a shady alley while clutter from the street drifted behind him. You're coming. I sighed and reluctantly said, fine, but I'm not wearing tights.
Visit BigWorldNetwork.com for more e-series samples or sign up for a $3 a month subscription for full access to all written and audio e-series content, accessible from the website, mobile, or e-reader devices. Thanks for listening.
Music by Kevin MacLeod.
You're listening to Big World Network.